Hi, my name is Matthias Trum and I run the Schlenkerla Smokebeer brewery in the 6th family generation. And today I want to show you how the smoke gets into the beer. Follow me. Here we are at the Schlenkerla kiln. This is where the malt is dried and gets its typical smoky aroma and flavor. Before we can start with the actual kilning process, we need to load the green malt onto the kiln. We have an automated transport unit which brings the green malt onto the kiln. The important thing to notice is that the green malt at this point still has the seedlings at the end of the grain. You can see this here at the end. So this seedling still is on the malt. That's why it's called green malt at the time. And in the drying process, this seedling will dry out. When you look at the floor, you will notice that it's made of metal and it has long cracks and holes inside. The smoke and the heat from the fire, which is lit underneath the kiln, they go through these holes and they kiln and dry the malt. The loading mechanism is fully automatic. Later on, the clearing is partially automatic. I'm going to show you that later on. The kiln is now loaded, so we can start the fire. For the classic Schlenkerla smoke beer, we use only beechwood logs from local forests. And as you can imagine, it's not quite easy to get a big beechwood log starting to burn. So the first thing we need to do is we need to dry this wood for a long time. Usually it's dried for around 3 years. And the fire starter is a very Schlenkerla specific tool. We don't use fuel systems which you have for your home barbecue to start the fire. What we actually have is the seals from the Schlenkerla wooden barrels. And this is the old way of lighting a fire in a brewery, because these are wax soaked and very effective heating system. So patience is important. It takes a little while until the big logs are on fire. So in about 20 minutes, the big fire is started and then the actual drying process starts. So the kiln has been burning for a little while now, and so the fire is a little bit stronger now. So you can see inside much more than when we started earlier on. And now the drying process runs for more than a day until the malt has its final aroma and flavor. This gives me the opportunity to tell a little bit about the history of the smoke malt and where it comes from. In the old days, this was a common technology to dry malt. Beer has been around for 10,000 years. When the first humans developed a settled life form, when they had discovered how to cultivate grain, they consumed the grain in a liquid and a solid form. The solid form was bread, the liquid form was beer. And the basic principle of beer making never changed over the last millennia. It's always the same biochemical process going on within the grain and within the fluid later on, fermentation, etc. Only the technology changed. What you see here, the open fire drying, or open fire kilning, That was the original form of drying malt. There's excavation sites from the Dead Sea in today Jordan, with kilns which are more than 5,000 years old from the Bronze Age. And they show us that back then the brewers were doing malt just like this. The today modern form of malting without smoky aroma and flavor, that was invented in the 17th century in Great Britain. Great Britain had depleted much of their wood supply for shipbuilding, for colonization, and wood had become very scarce and expensive. So they had to find a way to be able to utilize alternative fuels like coal or rushes or any type of wood where the aroma was not so important for the flavor of the final beer. There was an inventor, Sir Nicholas Holmes. If you look it up on Wikipedia, you can find his entire story. Nicholas Holmes developed a kiln which made it possible to dry malt without exposing the malt to the smoke from the fire. And as a side effect, that kiln could be used to dry virtually anything, not just malt, but also linen, cloth, hops, any material you wanted to dry. And it was much more cost efficient to use this modern technology of kilning malt rather than using the traditional form, because in the traditional form you always have to look at a high quality type of wood, a single type of wood, in order to get a good aroma in the beer. And in the industrialization process, this kilning technology was further developed. New industry maltings were founded that produced malt according to the new technology, and henceforth were supplying the breweries with the malt. Up until then, you have to keep that in mind, up until then, beer making and malt making was the same profession. A brewer always was also a maltster. Here in Germany, still today, when you learn the profession, it's called brewer and maltster. You always do both. And that was the common way of doing it for thousands of years. And only during the industrialization, the process got split up into a kilning process and a brewing process. And ever since then, we have malting companies and we have breweries. And Schlenkerla is one of the last breweries in the world to have its own malting operation. And we're pretty much the only brewery in the world, next to the Spezial brewery here in Germany, in Bamberg, that does this form of smoke kilning. Now, some people might think that all this is a very nice made-up story, but we actually have proof for that as well. There's an old image from the 17th century showing a brewery from France. When you look at the bottom line here, it says brasserie, which is the French word for brewery. But what you can actually see here is the kiln of the malting operation. So you have a fireplace, looks pretty much the same as here. And then you have a heat and smoke distributing unit. And here you have the grid where the grain lays on top, which you saw earlier on in the video. And the heat and the smoke from here, they rise up and they dry and kiln the malt. And as pointed out, this was called a brewery, not a maltings. Maltings did not exist as single companies before the industrialization. So if it wouldn't have been for the British industrialization, all the breweries in the world would still make malt like that. And the key thing what Schlenkerla did was not that we invented the smoke beer style. We didn't start the fire, but we were the ones to continue and uphold this old tradition all throughout the centuries. When everybody else was stopping the malting operation in the traditional ways, we continued it. And that's why when you have a Schlenkerla, it's a sip of beer history. So I hope you can enjoy that. Cheers. It's been more than a day since we started the fire, and all that's left to do is to clear out the kiln and get the smoke malt into storage. I show you, come on. So you don't see that on camera, but it's quite warm in here. The final drying temperature is more than 100 degrees Celsius for the smoked malt, which is higher than for normal malts, which results in a stronger and a more aromatic flavor. The important thing that happens here in the kilning process, I can show you. Remember from earlier on, in the green malt, there were the seedlings on the grain. These have now fallen off because they were dried. And the malt kiln, as they're called, they're taking out before the actual brewing process of the beer. And the malt is now very crispy and aromatic, and it's very good eatable. It's almost like a morning cereal. It has a strong smoky flavor to it and some malt sweetness. This malt sweetness is in the brewing process then transferred into sugars, which then is turned into alcohol and carbon dioxide. And as said, the special thing about the kilning process here, of course, is the smokiness, but also the high temperatures at which we kiln. So this makes up for a stronger flavor in the beer than for standard beers. The next time you have a Schlenkerla at home or in your favorite brew pub, keep in mind that this kilning technique has only survived here in Bamberg over the centuries, and Schlenkerla is one dinosaurs amongst the beers, if you will. And when you have a sip of Schlenkerla, it's a sip of beer history. Please enjoy that, and I hope to one day be able to greet you in our brewery tavern in Bamberg. Cheers.